Hello everyone, so I'm right here, and welcome to some more of Sulli-Ween. Well, since I've gone through one tradition of Sulli-Ween, it's time to move on to the next tradition of this fun season. My top 10 lists. But this isn't going to be looking over anything villain related, but it's still scary. And that is the movie moments that I find to be the scariest. As a kid, that is. Now, where some of these don't scare me nowadays, a couple of them still do. But these are the times that I only find scary, and a couple of them still do make me feel unsettled when going back over them. And this is just me and me alone and nobody else's. So, whether you're ready or not, here is my top 10 list of my top 10 scariest movie moments as a kid. Number 10. Jim Carrey in The Grinch. Okay, this one's silly to be scared of nowadays, but back then, the live-action Grinch scared me so much that I didn't see it in theaters because of Jim Carrey's makeup. Ever since the teaser trailer for it, I've always avoided looking at any advertisement of the film, and by the time I got the film on VHS on Thanksgiving the following year, I always covered my eyes whenever he appeared on screen or made an expression that I found too scary for my taste. But the more I watched it, the less scared I became, to the point of watching it every year and loving every minute of Carrey's antics as the classic holiday villain. Nowadays, I wish I'd seen the movie in theaters, because it was actually good, and hopefully by seeing Illumination's take on the story would make up for it. But as for Jim Carrey's take on the character, it took a while for me to warm up to it, and it no longer scares me. But my first experience at seeing him is one that I really never forget, and proves that what's scary as a kid can actually be very enjoyable as an adult. Number 9. The moments in Jumanji. I might have mentioned this before in my review of it, but let's get more out of it. This movie does have its scary moments, and there's plenty to go over. But many of them really did get to me, and I had to close my eyes at some of them. Young Ellen Parrish getting sucked into the board game, the big yellow plant trying to eat Peter, Ellen sinking in the attic quicksand, and Van Pelt getting sucked into the game near the end of the film. Those were just some of the scary highlights in an otherwise cool and fantastic film. I'm okay with seeing them nowadays, but for being a fantasy film from Joe Johnston and crew, all the frightening moments that happened in the first Jumanji movie were pretty scary for what they are, and are these days enjoyable to look back on. Most of the time. Number 8. The moments from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Speaking of Joe Johnston, here's another film he directed, but the scary moments in this film are more intense than Jumanji because of when it came out. Again, I might have mentioned them in my review of the film, but let's look into it more. All these moments happen when the kids get shrunk, and boy were they something. The kids getting thrown in the trash, the encounter with the scorpion, getting swept up by the lawnmower, the encounter with a bee, these and many others were the most shocking to me as a kid, even with knowing how they were done. And much like Jumanji, it's how they're presented that scared me. Yes, the film is fun and pretty enjoyable now that I'm over them, yet every single frightful scene in the movie were too much to handle, and thinking back to when I was scared of them may get me from time to time. Still a fun movie nonetheless, but the scary moments that happen really were scary when they happen. Number 7. Helen Cooper's death in Night of the Living Dead. Okay, even though it's a classic and I did watch it every year, I personally am not into the original Night of the Living Dead. Mostly because it has a character that does nothing to help in the second half onwards, and that the ending is so bleak and upsetting with no main character living. But even with that said, there are a few shocking moments in the film, but the one that got to me the most is the death of one of the characters, Helen Cooper. It all happened when the zombies start surrounding the house trying to get in, and as they knock down the door and windows, Helen escapes to the basement and sees her daughter has become a zombie, since she's been bitten by one earlier on. But Helen gets cornered by her, and the daughter takes a trowel and stabs her mother with it. What made this scary to me was the sound mixed with the visuals. Helen's echoing screams of terror and the stamping was enough to frighten me, and nowadays, it's nothing much. But for being one of the first films I watched to have such gory imagery at the time, it didn't grab me as much as that one scene. Despite coming from a film that I'm not a huge fan of, its one death scene is one that left me scared just from sound alone. Number 6. Judge Doom from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I mentioned how great of a villain Judge Doom is before in other videos, but here's a chance to look at his biggest highlight and scariest part of the film. As both him and Eddie Valiant get into a big fight near the end of the film, Doom gets his hand and foot superglued to the steamroller and becomes flat, revealing himself to be a Toon. But once he grows to his normal self, the last few minutes with Toon Doom were pretty shocking. Eddie's description of him sounded scary enough, but then to actually see it, along with being attached to Christopher Lloyd's head, made it even more scary. And with those eyes and that voice, I couldn't face it as a child, no matter how often I watched the movie. Of course, I'm used to it, but bits of it still creep me out. And though it comes from a great movie and I never get bored of it, Judge Doom's final appearance is one I never forget, and is still the most memorable for being the scariest part of the whole film. Number 5. The Coachman from Disney's Pinocchio. Of course, Disney has its share of scary moments in many of their animated films, and another list will have to cover what they are. But the Coachman from Pinocchio is one that scared me the most. Sure, there are other frightening moments like Monstro the Whale and Lampy turning into a donkey, but none of them scared me as much as the Coachman. And the one scene where he talks with Fox and Cat cemented it. It's when Fox and Cat offer Pinocchio to be taken to Pleasure Island by the Coachman, and when the Coachman says they won't be coming back as boys, he makes the most scariest face in Disney animated history, so scary that it even scared Fox and Cat. In one single frame, it terrified me to the point of covering my eyes when watching the film again, and it does give me the chills when seeing that one moment. And it all comes from a film that isn't too scary yet has its moments that gave me small doses of frights. But the Coachman's exaggerated yet terrifying face was too much for me to look at. It's very frightening and really out of nowhere, but it didn't scare me as much as the next one. Number 4. Lorenzini from The Adventures of Pinocchio. Yes, even though Disney's Pinocchio has the most in terms of scary moments, the charming and whimsical moments surpass them, making it good to watch over and over. But the 1996 live-action version of Pinocchio has its scary moments more intense than the animated one, leaving me not only covering my eyes more often, but watching it less. And the character Lorenzini takes the cake. Not that it's actually himself since he's a fine villain, it's more of his demise. Or transformation, I should say. After some of the boys of Pleasure Island gets turned into donkeys, Pinocchio tries to get his friend to fight back, and he does by kicking Lorenzini into a pond of his cursed water, giving him a hideous face that scared him to leaving the island. Later on, it's revealed that he becomes the whale that captured Geppetto and Pinocchio, but before that, I didn't know what to think of it. The shots from his one eye enlarging in the water to seeing his face in the mirrors gave me such a fright, and it's even more scary that it's in real life. Nowadays I'm fine with it, but I really wasn't back then. It was one moment that made me see that a scary moment in animation can be scarier in live action. All thanks to the director and puppeteers behind the original live-action Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yes, the same crew. Number 3. The shark attacks in Jaws. This is proof why the Steven Spielberg classic made people afraid to go in the water, and made me scared to never go swimming in the ocean. And yes, I might not see it as scary, but with the idea of not knowing what's beneath the waves, and hearing the screams and seeing such bloody gore for a PG-rated film, it just makes the film more unsettling in those regards. From the first attack with Christine in the opening, to the last attack with Quinn, all the killings made by the shark are enough to leave me scared, and the attacks are the major focus of the film. Where the attacks in other horror films don't bother me much, and only a handful do, this one got to me more as a kid. All the screaming and all the bloodshed were pretty intense to see back then. Now I appreciate them for being part of the film's identity, but they're also ones that made me afraid to go swimming in the open water, and I never did. That and some of the jump scares too. Number 2. Large Marge from Pee-wee's Big Adventure. As Tim Burton's first feature film as director, this is certainly a pretty enjoyable one, with little of his influence added in. But even when it is added, it can be very shocking to witness, and the film doesn't shy away from having such frightening moments, like Pee-wee's nightmares and Pee-wee getting stuck in the dark. Yet the ghost trucker Large Marge is the biggest and scariest moment in the entire film. It all happened when Pee-wee gets picked up by her in her truck and tells a scary story of the worst accident she saw, turns to Pee-wee and does this. And when she revealed that face, it scared me so much that I never saw the film again for years, and now it's pretty cool to witness. But oh man, it left me terrified to no end, and I tried to cover my eyes when watching it years later, thinking it would appear at any moment, and it took some time to get used to. But from the start of it all, it was too intense for me. It was only a matter of time for me to like this brief 2 seconds of stop motion that I wasn't expecting years ago. And what is cool nowadays was very shocking to see as a very young child. Before we get on to number 1 of my scariest movie moment as a kid, here are my runners-up. The moments from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. A fun movie, yes, but some of the moments that occur in this were, and maybe still are, frightening to me, with the highlights being Slugworth confronting Charlie Bucket, Augustus Gloop's demise, and the tunnel sequence, which is scary in some bits. The octopus from Popeye. Though coming from a decent movie, the climax of Olive Oyl getting caught by the octopus did shock me from how it was executed, and was one I dreaded when watching it back then. Jack Skellington from Nightmare Before Christmas. Still a cool character nonetheless, but the scary faces he made left me unsettled back then, and a little bit nowadays. The screams in King Kong. Definitely the most horrible thing to hear in this film, from not just Fay Wray, but from everyone, including the men, especially when no music is involved. Carface from All Dogs Go to Heaven. Yeah, some of Don Bluth's early films have scary moments in them, but Carface making the devil face takes the cake for me over Charlie's Nightmare or others, for being just one image of creepiness. Now with that out of the way, let's wrap it up. And my number 1 scariest movie moment as a kid is... the moments in Poltergeist. Ever since I did my compare and contrast of Poltergeist years later, there was no denying that what scared me the most as a kid still scares me these days. The original 1982 classic from Steven Spielberg and Tobe Hooper has the most frights that I have witnessed. In fact, they're so scary that I didn't watch the film again until I did the compare and contrast video. Yes, seriously. The tree attacking, the ghost head popping out of the closet, the various screams, usually from the kids in the film, they were the most intense back then and even now. A case where both sound and visual got to me a lot as a kid, that I ended up watching Space Jam to calm me down. No joke. You can say what you want about this film, but as for me, the stuff that happened in the film were what I say are the number 1 scariest movie moments as a kid. And speaking of scary, I feel like ending Sulli-Ween with an animated film that's so scary to becoming a Halloween classic. Yes, I really didn't like it when I first saw it, and I'm gonna get a lot of flack for reviewing it. But stay tuned to see what it is. And keep an open mind about it.